things like that.
Mm.
Famine, pandemic too, and that sort of thing. It's a really interesting question. I don't know enough about it. Because one of the reasons was the word "the Lord be with you" is plural.
Lord be with y'all.
Yeah, so it's Dominus vobiscum, not Dominus tecum. So,
yeah.
El Señor esté con ustedes, con vosotros, no, contigo. And you can't change that. So they're even, before like the 1930s, it was required to have 2 servers.
Interesting.
Supposedly. This is all, I think people don't realize that the liturgy is a lot more free for the council than what they make it out to be.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more regional variation, and the rules weren't followed as strict as what people think they were. It's kind of like in the United States, we're the only ones that really follow rules. Yeah,
I've heard that. Yeah, they go to Rome. I was like, oh, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Do we even use a missal? What's a missal? I don't know. I'm gonna move down the mic a little bit.
Good idea.
Ooh, I like that. This is new.
Oh, it's a big, long playlist. Favorite Star Wars movie? That could be another. I'm drinking out of my Rogue One cup.
That's true. That's controversial. What? That made no sense. Hello, Teresa and Terry Willard. Oh, Ashmore. Hi, Dad. Papa, how are ya? Donna, Karen, Terry, thank you very much. We appreciate the face touching advice, Terry. Oh my. Terry Russell says, FYI, if you're in isolation, neither you or Father Ashmore are sick, face touch away.
Okay, well that's from the nurse.
That is from the nurse. We'll still try not to. It's probably a good thing to try to say.
I know, this fellow named Gene Russell really laid into me.
It's true. Let me say. That's actually the best thing I found about the mask. Like personally, if I go out, it doesn't let me touch my face. Now, I'm sure there are other good reasons to wear the mask outside. Ones that are microbial and I can't see, but that has been a useful me.
Yeah, we keep using this playlist because we don't get dinged by folks
By the
for telling us
music
not
authorities.
to. Yeah, the music authorities. I've tried to use some like Haydn and stuff that is. The music itself is public domain. The performance may not be. So,
but how do you tell one performance the other?
I don't know.
Yeah.
How does algorithms work?
It'd be pretty impressive if you actually can. Like, there's some certain notes or there's certain a timbre of the instruments they're playing that they can do, but
It's impressive.
Yeah, I'm not sure I actually believe it. One thing that I've learned is that people think that we're a lot more technically advanced than we actually are. And we're a pretty technically advanced society, but there's a lot of things that we can't yet do that people just assume that you can. Such as using an algorithm just to figure out this trumpet versus that trumpet. Probably can, but can you do so on Facebook? Well, I don't know.
Yeah, I'm still waiting for those holographic rooms or whatever they have in Star Trek. Those are pretty cool. They seem like they're just like a real set. Yeah, they are.
Hi Terry, hi Mother, hi Terry, hi Debbie, Selena, hello. Jen. Touching my face. My eye itches. Oh. Bum 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 bum. Ooh, I like that.
Bum, 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 bum. I do like that share screen that Zoom has. That's pretty sweet.
Oh. Shoot, I made a mistake.
You did?
It's okay. No, it's the Zoom meeting was supposed to start right now, apparently. There we go.
Which Zoom meeting?
For RCA.
Oh, yeah, no.
No. It just didn't keep my 7 p.m. Hopefully the same Zoom link works. We'll see.
All right, well, it's 10 o'clock on our calendar, which means it's probably 10:01 on their calendar, or time, so we'd best to get started.
Indeed. How's everybody doing today?
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Fireside Chats. Glad to have you here today. Thanks for tuning in.
Today is Wednesday.
It is Wednesday, all day long.
Hump day.
Hump day.
Yeah. So.
Very good. Well, today we are drinking.
Let me get that
That's
away.
all right. We were drinking good old Folgers, but it's the black gold. So
Black gold?
no, it's not. It's black silk.
Okay, I was gonna say. I don't know what black gold is.
Black silk.
That sounds exciting.
It is. Well, and it's pretty good. I mean, the Folgers kind of premium line. I find it to be pretty tasty.
It's really not bad.
Yeah, they've also got like a coffee house blend and black silk and Folgers. I think had a.
Just an right now, I think.
What?
Don't worry. It's the emergency line, but I think I know who it is. Don't worry.
Okay. But the problem is that interrupts our music.
You're right.
The kind of the premium line of Folgers is pretty nice. I think it was a Kansas City company, or there used to be a big Folgers thing downtown.
Really?
There was.
I can't. Really? No,
Uh-huh.
I had no idea.
There was I think it's closed, but so back when I was working for the dance company, I had a friend that I would often pick up because we went to all these school performances all around the metro area to do that. We were doing a production of Stella Luna, a dance version of the story about the bat. It's a children's book. So we went to schools and did this performance of Stella Luna.
Mm-hmm.
I played the tree. Yeah. And
sounds like a very complicated part. Were you a pine? An ash? Were you an ash tree? I always like more ashes.
Yes, right.
Anyways, ha. But bum. So.
But anyway, so I used to pick her up, and so we'd drive her all around this metro area to do those performances. We sometimes did these lecture demonstrations or whatever. But anyway, she lived right downtown, and I drove past the Folgers plant when I picked her up, and it always smelled so good as they were brewing up roasting the burnt beans. Oh, it smelled so good.
I can imagine.
I think you can even still. I think the plant is closed, but I think even now, you can still get sometimes a whiff of the remnants of that.
Really?
brewing. Or at least a few years ago, I was driving past and I'm like, smells like that beautiful Folgers.
So I used to live in Pennsylvania, and everybody knows about Hershey, Pennsylvania, which was about, I think, 5 hours away from me.
Uh-huh.
Pennsylvania is a lot larger than what people think it is.
Right. Yeah.
Pittsburgh to Philadelphia is like going from one side of Kansas to the other side of Kansas. It's a long drive. Maybe a little shorter than Kansas, but long drive. But Hershey was about 5 hours away, and it was always said that when you can drive into Hershey's, you can smell the chocolate. Mm-hmm. But they closed the factory there and shipped it away to China, just like all things are wont to do, and you can't smell the chocolate anymore.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So.
Well, bummer.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, it's kind of like Emporia, right?
Ooh. One might say so.
No, Emporia used to have kind of a bad reputation for that. I'm not sure if it still does as much.
You know, when you used to drive into Emporia, because I used to go to school in Mulpe, Kansas,
right?
And then we drive into Emporia occasionally. The IBP plant had a certain aroma, one might say. Mm-hmm. And when you drive down there, it still has. I don't think it's as bad as it used to be, though.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm. But I actually said mass in Emporia. A couple months ago, and I found it to be a charming little town.
Oh yeah, I did too. So I was there for Palm Sunday last year. I was covering for Father Nick Blaha.
Oh,
he had
okay.
something else. I think because he was the. So that's where Father Dan is. Remember? He's in Emporia, and so you were covering Father Dan, I think.
No, I was covering for Father.
Oh,
Matt Nagel.
Right. So Father Dan is at the. There is a. I think it's pretty much purely Spanish parish.
St. Catherine's?
Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Which is maybe the only one in the diocese, actually.
I think you're right about that.
Because most parishes have...
Are they de Guadalupe and Spica?
No, they're English.
Oh, really?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
I mean, they've got some Spanish, but that's kind of an older... A lot of it is an older Hispanic community that grew up there, and so a lot of second, third generations, and so they've got a lot of English masses, if I recall.
I didn't know that.
Yeah,
okay.
they've got a pretty. It's similar to a lot of our other parishes. So it started off as the Mexican American parish,
just like the Croatian parish,
right?
Just like
But as time has evolved, they have quite a bit of English ministry there, if I recall. I'm not too familiar.
Yeah, I've only been there once, I think, maybe twice.
Yeah. Anyway, so Father Dan is at possibly the only pure, because I think all of their services are in Spanish there. I mean, some of the kids might speak English and stuff, but all of the stuff is done in Spanish, I think, there.
Right. Father Oswaldo's family is from there.
That's right.
Yeah. Was he ever there, Oswaldo?
Not a sign.
Not a sign there? Okay,
Yeah.
I didn't think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I found it to be a charming little town. So I went
agree.
to the Diddy Catholic Campus Center to say Mass, and I believe they had like a 10 o'clock a.m. Mass and then a 7 o'clock evening Mass. And so I drove up for the 10 o'clock a.m. Mass, and then I had all afternoon to walk around the town. I went and saw sat at a coffee shop and read for a little while, went over to ESU, kind of walked around ESU for a little while, over where that is located down the main street. It was a nice little place. So.
Yeah. No, I think Emporia is a really nice town. I was impressed there when I was there last time too. So
there we are. We got a lot of little gems here in Kansas. That
we do.
Maryville is a bit of a gem too, which is very far away. Marysville. I'm sorry. I used to live in Conception, which is right by Maryville.
Well, see, here's how you remember the difference. It was Marysville in Kansas and Maryville in Missouri. And the way you remember the difference is because Kansas has an S in it.
Oh. But Missouri has an S in it, too.
We'll get to logical fallacies in a minute. But seriously, that's the way I remember it. Is because I remember, Kansas has an S in it. Oh yeah. Because that's what the reaction is most of the time. It's like, oh yeah.
And then wait a minute.
Well, because it's Missouri, not Kansas. It does sound more like an S, so there is some some method to the logic. Is that you remember that Marysville is the one in Kansas because Kansas has an S in it.
Okay.
Notice I didn't say Missouri doesn't have an S in it.
Yeah.
But yes, Marysville is a delightful little town there. So I used to be in Sabetha, Kansas, so Sabetha, Fidelity, and Wetmore, and Marysville is about an hour from Sabetha, if I recall, and you just keep going on 36. So you hit Seneca, which is between Sabetha and Marysville, and so that's about a half hour away, or 25 minutes, and then there's another half hour, 25, 35 minutes to Marysville. But every time I came into Marysville, I felt like I was coming into this grand metropolis because there's just it's beautiful up there, but there's not a whole lot of like towns or cities. And you come into Marysville, and it just feels like it's just huge, and it feels like a thriving community.
They built a beautiful church there.
They did
recently.
Indeed.
So Father Nathan Haberlin was sent there probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yep.
And within a year or two, he had already a church built, which is incredible.
Right.
Now, mind you, they had been doing this for a long time. It was
Right.
one of those situations that stalled.
Right.
Lots of politics and all that, but he did a fantastic job on that.
Yeah.
Building.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so they had a church, and then they tore that one down, and it's been a hardship for Marysville people, because apparently that old church was beautiful.
Yeah.
As the urban legend goes, or the rural legend goes, as the case might be, they said that the church was unstable, and then they took a wrecking ball and they couldn't knock it down.
Right.
That's how the rural legend goes, and then they built this not a particularly pretty church in place of it, and caused much strife for many people over the generations. But now finally they do have a really beautiful church. I haven't seen it in person yet, but the pictures look lovely.
I saw it once.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, it's very classic. I mean, so if it's not particularly modern. So for those that it has some modern elements, of course. But if you're first looking at it, it's like, man, that could have been built in the 1920s or something. Which
I think the altar,
some people
or
love,
the reredos, it's called, the back behind the altar region. I believe that's from a church built in the early 19th century.
Okay.
Somewhere. So
19th century, 1900s.
1900s. Pardon me. Yeah. Centuries are tough. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think so. So they did a beautiful job of not throwing out some of our old heritage in that too.
Well, and up there in that area too, I think, it matches with the area. Sabetha, where I was, I think it's the only kind of like fan style church, kind of non-Gothic-ish kind of church up there in that entire Nemaha Marshall region, if I recall. I mean, I really like that style myself, and you know, Good Shepherd is very round, whatever, very modern. I personally like that style, but most of the community up there in Nemaha Marshall are accustomed to, you know, old traditional. I don't know, what's that called? Neo-Gothic or whatever the...
Well, it would just be basilical style.
Basilical style.
Mm-hmm.
And so it really matches, and I think I think it works very well there in Marysville, because it matches the rest of the churches that are up there for the most part. Wetmore was a we built a church in Wetmore I started that while I was there, but it's an impressive little church for I think 70 families. I was really impressed with how they did that. I mean, it's not. So they wanted to do like the old thing that Wetmore had. Everyone agreed it was possibly the most ugly church in the diocese. I mean, I don't think I'm not because it was a 2-room schoolhouse, but not a cute 2-room schoolhouse, like a 1960s brick thing where you have 2 rooms and there was a middle thing. So they knocked that out, and then that became their church. And so there was like 2 columns in the middle of the church that were like holding up the building. It was terrible. And so they really wanted to build another one, but there wasn't a whole lot of money to build a huge big Gothic thing because it was 70 families. Mm-hmm. But they did a really nice job. But they wanted to do the first thing was, let's just do kind of a prefab building. I said, let's see if we can take us one step beyond that. So we took it one step beyond a prefab building, and it really turned out nice. It's brick on all the outside, but it's a modest church, but they did a very lovely job with it. So
interesting.
Yeah.
So interesting fact. So he was talking about like the difference in Gothic, basilical, and that sort of thing. What's fascinating is that in the early Rome, most of the churches were originally political buildings. They would have been the not necessarily the courthouse, but if you can imagine, like our courthouses or our state buildings were the largest and most grandiose buildings, and so that'd be kind of similar to Rome and Greece and the other areas where there were churches in the early church. And so what happened is the Christian style of architecture essentially formed out of Roman architecture, adding Jewish and Christian elements to it, and putting an altar where the apse of the building would be. So if you can imagine, the style of the building is one long building, square rectangle with an apse, and the apse butts out, and it's a semicircle on one side. So it's a pillar with a semicircle in a certain way, or a column with a semicircle. In ancient Rome, orators would go and they would speak where the apse was, because you stand inside the apse and it would project your voice so everybody could hear you in the building. And so the early styles of churches was they'd put an altar there, and they'd put a chair there for the priest, and he'd preach from the chair where the apse was, so his voice could be heard throughout the whole thing. And then they'd celebrate Mass on the altar there. And so it was a very practical design, and it was also grandiose because they were using their best buildings for the church. Yeah. And anything up until, really, there wasn't that much of a variation on that design church-wise up until the 20th century. There were little things here and there. You can go and you can see little variations with
like Hagia Sophia.
What's that?
Hagia Sophia is a different one, another one.
Exactly. But in the Roman Catholic design, that was pretty standard.
Oh yeah, okay, I see that.
Exactly. So Hagia Sophia
is more
orthodox.
Yeah.
Well, Eastern Orthodox.
Eastern side, yeah.
Exactly. And so if you ask, like, what's the difference between a basilica style church versus a Gothic church? There's really not that much of a difference, except it was just later, and so it had a different style. And then, the Gothic church takes the basilica style and then adds a lot of arches to it, and pointed arches and altars that are very tall, that sort of thing. So
very good. Let me go to my camera while maybe my nieces are still there, because I get really delightful videos and pictures sometimes from my sister talking about how my nieces are watching the show, and I got a really cute one of Rachel watching it 2 days ago or yesterday, and it was really, really cute. And I guess, I'm sorry, Rachel, you're riding a bicycle. a bicycle with training wheels, not a tricycle, a bicycle with training wheels, and it was really, really good when you were doing that the other day. So I hope you got to go out in it yesterday, because I think it's supposed to rain today. But I'm also drinking out of my Star Wars cup here today. Do you remember when we watched Star Wars together, and we watched all those movies with Princess Leia and Amidala and Chewbacca and Yoda and all those characters? So I'm drinking out of my Star Wars cup today. So hello Rachel, hello Rosalie, hello Laura. There's my shout out for you. I hope you have a great day. All right, bye bye. And we are back.
Okay. So
it is really precious, the videos that I get sometimes from my
adorable.
sister.
I'll
Yes.
grant that. So we were talking yesterday
Yes.
about love versus charity versus other things, and I got a question about that, and they wanted me to talk more about that.
Okay.
And I thought we could for a moment, but I also want to talk about something else. So
Yes.
before we begin, our thoughts are tell us if you guys have any more questions.
If you have any questions, we're always open for questions, and we can't always answer them on the day that we receive them, but we like to, sometimes we'll say, well, let's think about that some more. So
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So
but please type them in, and we are monitoring these comments.
there was a question about what is love, what is charity versus that, and I explained that.
Baby, don't
love,
hurt me.
What's that?
Baby, don't hurt me.
No more. Charity is a particular species of love, and it's a love oriented towards God, and that's why I prefer when I say faith, hope, and charity. I don't say faith, hope, and love because for me, that's not wrong at all. But I'm referring to a specific species of love. I want to love God more, and that's what we're praying for in that particular virtue. The virtue of charity is love oriented towards God.
And I usually say faith, hope, and love because I find charity to be confusing sometimes to folks.
Mm-hmm.
But so
this gets
tomato.
Mm-hmm. Well, no, it's not. It's not tomato or tomato because that gets
because
us into,
I'm wrong.
Well, no, not necessarily. But it gets us into the topic of equivocation. One word can have different meanings at times, and if we don't watch that carefully, then we can get confused.
No, I concur wholeheartedly that charity is more precise and more proper. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. We're not disagreeing. It gets us on this interesting topic of
Sure. Yeah.
How do we use language and whatnot. Before we go on to this, the person who asked this question specifically wanted to talk about different types of Greek love. In Greek, there are 4 types. There are 4 words for love. C.S. Lewis has a whole book about it called The 4 Loves. It's Phileo, Storge, Eros, and Agape. I'm not really that familiar with that theory. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't know too much about it. I can speak about it a little bit. What are you doing? Fascinating.
I was just pulling out the wedding preface, the marriage preface. Gary, carry on.
Okay.
When you're done.
And so the idea is that is that agape is a self-giving love. So you love out of your desire to bring good to another. Filio is the love between brothers or friends in a certain way, friendship. Storge would be the love that a parent has for a child, and a child has for a parent. And then Eros would be the love between lovers. All those are good, and there's some really interesting things you can do about that. When you take that, I think that distinction can be helpful. I just don't know too much about it, to be completely honest. I haven't actually read that particular book from C.S. Lewis, so. What's interesting about that is, especially when we read sacred scripture, there's a lot of interchange between what word they use, whether it's filio, eros, agape. Generally, it's either filio or agape. It's interesting to see when they use one versus another. One thing that's really fascinating about that is to show that eros, which is sexual love, is not bad. And it
Eros is fine, as the song says.
Right, but it just has to be purified.
Uh-huh.
And so when eros becomes purified, it becomes agape, which is that self-giving love. And that's why we get married. Because if you didn't ever get married, then you would never be able to have that real purification that comes from living with someone and cleaning up after them and all that truly life-giving love, rather than, because it always stays in that possessive love. Eros is possessive. But the sacred scripture and Pope Benedict himself in one of the documents actually refers to the fact that God has a certain eros for us. Now, that sounds weird, but it's because the sexual love of eros finds its source in God. So when we love in that way that two lovers love, we are loving like God, but he does it in an entirely pure, non-physical way.
Mhm.
So there's a very interesting play within all those four different types. That's kind of, I don't have true expertise on this particular topic, though. I don't know if you can say more about it.
I do not have any particular expertise on that. I remember studying it a little bit, but I'm not particularly prepared to go into the four loves.
Right, exactly.
As they're called.
Mm-hmm.
So.
It's very interesting, though.
Mhm.
So, what are you doing?
Well, I was just again, not to belabor the point too much, but in the New Translation, you know, that they use charity because it's caritas, right, in Latin, which would be the more accurate translation and the truer sense of love. But I don't find it always rolls, at least off of my tongue, as well as love, and particularly like at a wedding, people don't generally say "I charity you."
Right.
So, like for instance, here's the preface that it says. For you will that the human race, created by the gift of your goodness, should be raised to such a high dignity that in the union of husband and wife you might bestow a true image of your love. Okay, all quite beautiful, I think. And then it says, for those you created out of charity, you call to the law of charity without ceasing, and grant them a share in your eternal charity. For me, that doesn't really roll off the tongue, and I would prefer, but I don't make changes to the liturgy because we're not supposed to, right?
Right.
It would resonate more with me immediately as I'm hearing the liturgy if it were to say, for those you create out of love, you call to the law of love without ceasing and grant them a share in your eternal love. I think that's more immediately graspable,
Right.
but not as accurate to what we are actually talking about. So then if the couples, because when I do a wedding, the couples can choose all these prayers. If they choose this one, I read it as written. I don't make any changes, but it's not usually my first choice if I have the choice, because it feels a little mechanical and difficult to get at just for my own, as I'm celebrating the Mass. So.
Interesting. Well, when I hear that, I think about honestly how beautiful it is in a certain way, because the fact that we can use charity for love for another shows that it's a love of God that is being participated in that moment by our human love. You know what I mean? So that's why I like the word, because when you're being specific, you're saying, oh my goodness, when I love another person, when a husband loves his wife with charity, that means he's loving with God's love. Which is astounding.
Yes.
You know what I mean? So we don't think about that enough, that through the sacrament of matrimony, we're given the capacity to love with God's love another person.
So maybe my invitation there, oh pastor here, is to do better formation with my couples and invite them to consider what love is, and to use that word of charity as I'm meeting with the couples to say, hey, this is what you're called to in marriage.
Right.
That might be a good lesson for me to learn.
Well, perhaps. What's interesting about this is that when you speak other languages, you don't come across this problem. This is a poverty of English. That we don't have enough words for love anymore. There was that distinction. There is that distinction in English between charity and love, but it's kind of awkward. But in other languages, such as Spanish, you would never say, I love ice cream with amor, with amar. You would never say, I love ice cream with the word amar. You would only use that for other people. So they have, but you could say, I suppose, no, actually,
me encanta.
Me encanta, yeah, exactly. Or it follows on me well, they say, me cae bien, or some things like that.
Right.
I
think I use the word amor because I don't usually. I sometimes have trouble with my Spanish. So and so people are probably looking at me. Why does he eros love his ice cream?
So, but that gets us into the topic of one thing I want to talk about today. which is the idea of equivocating. Equivocating is when you have one word that means several different things, and you confuse that use with another use.
Very good.
So
before I just want to say,
yes.
Pat, I see your question about Judas. We'll get to that, but let's continue this train of thought here.
Okay, and that leads us to a question about how do you think well? Now that's it should be a bit of a shocking statement, and I want it to be shocking. Most people don't think well because they're never taught how to think.
True.
Thinking is an art, and
Okay.
thinking has its own rules.
Sure.
And you can see the proof of this by watching our media today. From whatever side you're on, we make mistakes all the time in how we present things and how we think about issues. Because we're not taught how to think at a young age anymore. It used to be standard in school.
To teach logic.
To teach logic, exactly. And logic is the rules for how to think well. How do you we learn in math 1 + 1 = 2. How do we do that with a thought process? That's logic.
But it's all about our feelings, Father.
It's not. And so one part of logic is what we call the logical fallacies. And those are arguments that on face seem convincing, but are actually invalid ways of presenting an argument. They're invalid because they have this fallacious thought underneath. Equivocating is one of them. So like the difference is, you could say the word bat. I can think of 3 ways that the word bat is used. First of all, bats. Eek, eek. Those little things.
Those are birds.
Those are bats birds?
No, but according to Leviticus, they are.
Oh, okay. So bats. Eek, eek. Yeah, okay.
That's another. Can I do a side note?
Totally.
I sometimes talk when I teach about Leviticus and I do our Bible studies or whatever. When people talk about we must take the Bible literally, I sometimes use that as an example of you need to remember the context of when the Bible was written.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you just read Leviticus literally and it's the Word of God, therefore that's what it is,
Mm-hmm.
you ignore science that says bats aren't birds,
Mm-hmm.
but since the Bible says that the bats are birds, therefore they're birds, so I don't care what the scientists say, bats are birds. I sometimes use that as an example, because it gives a whole list of birds that are forbidden to eat,
Mm-hmm.
and the last one says, and the bat.
And the bat.
So, anyway,
Interesting.
side note on Leviticus.
Okay. It would have been good to take that advice, though.
Well, yes.
Just joking.
I mean, yes, it might still be good to...
Anyways, I'm sorry.
Yeah, well,
So-
someone else was commenting about that on Facebook just the other day. I was like, oh, I'll just throw that in there. So, anyway.
Okay. So bats.
Bats. Those
The
birds.
little mammal.
Uh-huh.
The second thing, a bat. I can swing a bat. Third one, I can bat my eyes.
Yes.
Can we think of anything else? I think those are the 3 I can think of.
Yeah. Well, similar like you bat away a fly or something.
Yeah, bat away a fly. There's a movement there. Now, when we say those in English, we know that those mean 3 different things. You would never say, so I swung the bat in the baseball game. And, well, that was rather rude, wasn't it? What did that little mammal do to you? Like, that's not what I meant.
Right.
I mean the bat. But sometimes we can use the same words in logical phrases, and they mean 2 different things, but we have one word for it. So in this case, talking about love. Love means several different things. I love ice cream. I love my friend. I love God. Those are 3 different types of love, and if you confuse them, then you're going to come to bad distinctions, which means, for instance, that I can love God with the same love that I have for ice cream.
Mm-hmm.
That's false. Clearly false. So, I am going to have Father Kent bring up a whole page called
Are you ready for
logical
that?
fallacies. Yes.
Okay, here we go. It's
One
going to cover
logical
us up.
fallacy we just learned was equivocation.
It's going to be hard to see all this, I will, but you can at least see the big things, and now our whole faces have been covered.
Okay.
So because I've made it as big as possible. I can make it a little bit bigger, actually.
So we have our logical fallacies there. And when we see one of these...
I'm going to take out the thou shall not, then I'll get us a little more space.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
it's
okay, you see it says thou shall not commit logical fallacies, okay?
I find them amusing.
It's amusing, but then you can't see the rest of the stuff. I concur. But now we're going to that's as big as I can make it, right there.
So we have some some of the logical fallacies. And I'm just going to point out a few of them. One of them is the genetic fallacy. You can see down to the right. That means the genetic fallacy.
But you can't really read any of those small words, I
Okay.
guess. But so you're gonna have to read that what it says.
Okay. The genetic fallacy says you can judge something good or bad on the basis of where it comes from or from whom it comes. In the example, it says, accused on the 6 o'clock news of corruption and taking bribes, the senator said that we should all be very wary of the things we hear in the media because we all know how very unreliable the media can be.
Right. Uh-huh.
So that senator is trying to undermine the accusation by saying it's just coming from the media and therefore you shouldn't believe it.
Right.
A good example of this would be, I heard this on Fox News, therefore it can't be true. Or I heard this on Vox Media, therefore it can't be true.
Right.
Those two that's a logical fallacy.
Uh-huh.
It may be false and it may be false, but we have to judge the argument on its merits.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And those things, I mean, the reason that genetic fallacy comes up is because perhaps they've got a history of doing bad stuff
Mm-hmm.
or doing bad journalism or whatever, but you want to look at each thing separately. Yeah, because I've posted some things from these spots, and they say, "Well, I can't believe that because it comes from this source." Well, yes, I would say watch your sources absolutely, but I'm gonna put our faces back on. We can bring it back up.
Yeah,
But, watch your sources absolutely, but just to say. The logical fallacy is because this source says that, therefore it's untrue. That's the logical fallacy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Mm-hmm. So another logical fallacy would be the loaded question. This one is fun because when you can do a loaded question well, it's hilarious. But
Okay.
it's not good. Asking a question that has an assumption built into it so it can't be answered without appearing guilty. So the example that he put here is, Grace and Helen were both romantically interested in Brad. One day, with Brad sitting within earshot, Grace asked in an inquisitive tone whether Helen was having any problems with her fungal infection. Helen may not have a fungal infection, but asking it aloud like that, you're assuming that she does, and so now you're going to assume the answer within there, that she has problems with fungal infections, which may send Brad off of may not make Brad as available.
Because now I've got it in my brain that
she's
fungal.
Yeah, she's fungal. Right. So the examples of this would be the lawyer who comes to the defendant and says, "What did you do after you killed Miss Sawyer?"
Right.
Wait a minute. He may never have killed Miss Sawyer, but he's asking, "What did you do after it?" So there's that logical fallacy there. He's loaded the question on one side.
Uh-huh.
So another one could be no true Scotsman.
No true Scotsman. Yes. I didn't know what this one was at all. I'm looking at the camera, but you can't see me at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No true Scotsman. I was like, what is that? I've never heard of that. But yes, you have heard of it because he's going to explain it to you.
No true Scotsman would be when somebody says, no true Catholic would believe this.
Uh-huh.
No true conservative. No true liberal.
If you were really a Catholic, you would do this.
Exactly. Well, that may be true. That may not be true.
Uh-huh.
But you can't just use that reasoning.
Mm-hmm.
And are there any other ones we want to...
I can post this whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a problem with that, posting it on the Facebook?
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
We'll have to look at
You
that.
can get it free online, but you also have to give them your email address to get it free. So it's somebody else's.
Hopefully this isn't illegal for us showing this. It's really good though.
Mm-hmm.
But well, we might be able to show it on the. You can at least pause it and look up any of these things. But it's really, yeah. So if someone wanted to see this, where
you would just type in logical fallacy poster.
There you go.
Yeah.
So you can do that now if you want to pull up another screen or something. But the logical fallacy poster, you should be able to find it. But it's very interesting. But you were going to mention one other one. Is it?
A straw man.
Straw man. Yeah. Tell me about straw man. I sometimes get my straw man confused.
So straw man.
If I only had a brain.
Yeah, exactly. Straw
Because I
man.
don't.
Maybe you can switch your.
Yes. Are you ready to see us?
Yeah.
Okay.
Straw man is when you make somebody else's argument weaker in order to then break down that argument.
Yeah. So give me an example of a straw man.
Let's see. I want to defend Now, this is just an example.
Yeah, sure.
I want to defend invading Iraq in 2003.
Okay.
And so, I want to attack the other person's argument. So I say, well, all you wanted to do was, let's see, you say something along the lines of, you were an isolationist at that point. You didn't care about anybody else. You didn't care about any other countries. All you cared about was the United States, period.
Okay.
That would be a straw man, because the person who's attacking the invasion in 2003 is not necessarily being an isolationist. They're saying it may not have been prudent.
Uh-huh.
I'm not actually attacking it. I'm just saying that could be an argument.
That's an argument, right. He's using a straw man example.
Exactly. Well, we could do that with 1941 or something. The only reason why we entered World War II was because of Pearl Harbor. We didn't actually care about Germany or France. It'd be taking a fact, making it weaker, to then attack it.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So, why do we bring this up? Well, because
do tell there, Father Ashmore.
Because we get caught all the time in church dialogue and political dialogue under these logical fallacies, and it can be really dangerous. Somebody says, well, they make an ad hominem attack, which is that during the argument, rather than trying to discover the truth, they attack the person. Or we commit these genetic fallacies that, because Trump said this, it has to be false, or because Hillary Clinton said this, it has to be false. Or we do this all the time, and what that ends up stopping us is discovering the truth. And so our dialogue becomes, rather than dialogue to discover the truth, it becomes this argument where we are just throwing mud at each other. And if we don't argue well, then we never really discover the truth.
So I'm going to post this image link, I guess, because I can't find a real quick one. But yeah, it was easy. You just Google logical fallacies poster, and it's there. So this is what I Googled there, and that should get you there. And then click any of those links. I didn't know which one to pick in 30 seconds. So yeah, it has that poster. So
again, so logical fallacies do not necessarily make an argument false. It just means that the reasoning for the argument is not good.
Right.
And so we always have to try to purify our reasoning. It's part of having integrity.
Yeah.
It's really easy to make up bad arguments. I can make up bad arguments all day long. It's a lot harder to think through the argument,
right,
and build up the process by which I'm doing it. But it's a lot better because it makes me intellectually honest.
It would be really fun if we could do like a whole fireside chat or something of us sitting here doing logical fallacies back and forth to one another.
Yeah,
that'd be kind of fun.
Like a fake debate.
A fake debate of, and if we really worked it up, it'd be cool because we could have a graphic underneath that is, here he's going to do this, and now here he's going to do this. I could do that maybe in post-production. Maybe it'd be like a fireside chat, like special edition or something, not our normal time, or something. But we could just do that just for fun, like a little logical fallacies video brought to you by the company that brings you Fireside Chat. Yeah, exactly. Here is the logical fallacies debate.
In a world where intellectual honesty does not exist, two men set out.
I really like this idea.
That's funny.
It sounds really fun to do that. We could come up with some sort of a bizarre argument to allowing elephants in school or something like that, or whatever, and we could debate this.
That's an interesting idea.
Okay, so it won't be like a normal fireside chat. So don't get too confused.
If you're sitting here going,
"Stop this
what
talk.
are they doing?" But
so
that was just a topic I was thinking about this morning.
No, it's a great one. Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. I remember in seminary, one of my seminary brothers was talking about how lamenting the lack of teaching logic, and I think it's very true that because logical fallacy arguments are really compelling, and people like them, and so people play into that, I suppose. The media, politicians, whatever, because they know it can get to your emotions and affect you that way, and get your vote or get your clicks or whatever. And so it's always refreshing when someone uses like real reasoning and logic.
But it's not always immediately convincing, and that's the problem.
Exactly, right.
Because it's engages your intellect rather than your passions, your emotions.
It's one of the reasons I suppose I have trouble with politics is because it seems like many politicians use these kinds of things, and it's frustrating. I want to hear a logical argument. It seems like, and again, I'm not talking about any kind of policies or anything.
No. We're just, if I use an example, it's only for the purpose of the...
Right, but it seems like some of the politicians that were up for the Democratic, I think some people were, and even for the presidential debate from 4 years ago, it seems like some people were really talking about how refreshing it was for someone to actually have like good logic as they are doing this, not just attacking. And that is always refreshing, at least for me, when I hear a politician using sound arguments, not attacking the other person, not using these ad hominem or straw man or whatever. It's always refreshing, at least for me.
Certainly, and I think our media today, one of the problems that we have is our media today awards quick jabs in arguments.
It's true.
And by that I don't even mean like ABC or NBC. I mean Twitter. I mean Facebook.
If you get into 100, how many letters? 144. How much is a tweet?
144 characters, I think.
I don't
have to
remember.
double check on that. Something
Which is gross.
Something like that. But I think they actually you can actually have a longer. I think they have a longer Twitter form now that you can.
That
use.
might be true,
but a lot of people are trying to get their 10 seconds on the screen. You can really, I think this was really evident during the Democratic debates. Again, not speaking politically here, just talking about the
Logical
argumentation
arguments,
style. Sometimes the next morning after the debate, you'd be watching the news or listening to the news, and you'd hear 5 seconds of an argument. And you'd hear the crowd go crazy, but you had no idea of what the context was. You had no idea of what was actually being argued. You just heard that jab. And so the media itself, and I'm not saying any particular media source, but the type awards poor argumentation because it has that quick jab that they can then sell and then put an ad on both sides of them.
Exactly. Right. Yep. Which is, I think. I think that sometimes maybe there's just too much media out there or whatever, but yes, most of us, myself included, I want a quick digest of the news of what do I need to know, because I don't necessarily have a time to watch a whole hour debate or whatever. I want to have the condensed version, and so then the media thinks, okay, how can I serve that need that is out there, supply and demand or whatever, and so how. And then it just kind of plays in spirals. But I would say that probably something like those news hours. And again, I don't know too much about, but it seems like, at least when I've watched a little bit of it, when I watch something of a PBS news hour or even like 60 Minutes or something that does these more extended, longer pieces, tend to be more balanced, more going into the details, not about those quick jabs. But you can't, unless you watch the whole thing, you can't get into it or whatever. You can't follow the thing, or some of the stuff that comes out of the BBC or whatever. So using something from not our country, I often find that media kind of refreshing, but it takes more time.
Right, and one of the biggest problems that leads to this is the cell phone, because we want to read the quick articles on the cell phone, and so we look. But what they found online is that when people read articles online, say it's an article with 20 paragraphs, the eyes of the person read the first line, then go down and read the next line on the next paragraph. So you're essentially skimming every paragraph without realizing it. So you're not actually reading the article off.
Right. I would say, I would see that myself.
So it's like this process of one line, not really interesting. Oh, there's something interesting. One other line, okay, down there, and it makes it so you never actually are engaging the material.
Right.
So,
which again makes those logical fallacy arguments all the more compelling because you can get those in pretty quick.
Exactly. So this is not just merely political. This is religious too.
Sure.
There's
Yeah.
all sorts of religious arguments that are logical fallacies.
Oh, sure.
All the time.
Yep.
And we've got to just watch out for those.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Good. I think that's an interesting conversation. So we are totally nerding out. Yes, maybe we need to bring it back here.
we've kept our people though. I was watching.
Well, yeah, we've lost a few, but so let's get to. Pat was talking about if you're still here, Pat.
Yeah.
Judas, I haven't had really a chance to skim your. I haven't had a chance to read it, so.
The question about Judas.
Yeah, I'm not. I don't. You had a homily on Judas? Was that like a daily?
I think it was a weekday
Yeah.
homily Spy Wednesday. I mentioned Judas at one point. I don't have much more to say about him. There is not much more that we know about him than what is in the gospel itself.
There was a movie, however, that was called Judas.
Really?
It was very interesting. I think I finished it. So back when I lived at Our Lady of Unity, there was the library right next door. I mean, literally next door, and it was really nice just to walk there because I could pick up videos all the time. There's one called Judas. I'm like, oh, that looks interesting. But it was an interesting movie, and just kind of gave a different perspective on just things to think about with Judas, because he does get a bad rap. I mean, he did betray Jesus, but we forget sometimes that we remember just that one action, but we forget that he was a disciple of Jesus for 3 years and walked with Jesus, and some of the concerns that he had might not be all that different from some of the concerns that we might have about our religious leaders. And so I don't remember too much about the movie, but I remember it was an interesting perspective, and it's interesting that a movie is called Judas, and it was kind of a sympathetic reading toward Judas. Of course, then Jesus Christ Superstar, we were talking about that the other week. That's written from the perspective, really, of Judas. We don't know much more about Judas, but I think the main spiritual point that we sometimes say, and you probably said in your homily, and it seems like Pat is talking about that a little bit, is sometimes we make that distinction between Peter and Judas, that Peter did something very wrong too, right? He denied knowing Jesus. That's bad. That's apostasy, right? And so Peter denies he knows Jesus, not once, not twice, but 3 times. 3 shall be the number. And he denies him 3 times. And yet he comes back and mourns his sin and is given the mercy of God. And then Judas, again, we don't know too much, but that's the spiritual thing that's sometimes drawn between the difference of Peter and Judas. One accepts mercy and accepts that he can be forgiven, and one does not. So,
Yeah.
but I don't know if there's anything more on that.
There's really not. I think it's sometimes there can be the temptation to want to think or like ponder Judas too much, or there can also be the temptation to want to like ponder demons too much or things like that. And so I think it's good just to recognize that Judas was a sinner, like us. His sin led him down a certain path, and try not to follow his example and let the rest up to God. You know what I mean?
Right.
And you can think about like what happened, that's true, but there's what's called sinful curiosity. I'm not saying that's what you have here, but there can be a temptation to what's called sinful curiosity, which is trying to think about dark things too much, essentially.
Right. Right. We don't want to do that.
Yeah.
And we don't know where Judas is now, too. I mean, again, I say often that the church has never declared any particular person in hell.
Yeah.
Declared lots of particular people in heaven. Those are called saints. But no particular person that has lived. I mean, demons are fallen angels, I guess, but no particular person has ever been declared to be in hell, including Judas. So people sometimes jump to, well, Judas is in hell now, but the church has never said that. So. All right, well, I think we're out of time here.
Yes,
so thanks so much for tuning in. And Mary, thanks for joining here at the very last minute there, it looks like. I forgot to check the tube. Nothing on the tube. Very good. So thanks so much for watching. Again, keep those questions coming, and we'll try to respond to them as we see them. Anything else to add?
Not today. Thank you all very much.
We do have our staff meeting today. I'm excited for our first Zoom staff meeting. So we're trying to connect with all of our wonderful staff here, and so that's where we're off to now. So say a prayer for our staff, and that we have a good meeting here today. So that'd be great.
All right.
Right. Thanks.
Thank you all very much. God bless you.
Yep.